This is the second part of the remarkable story of Margaret Barry, presented by Tommy Fagan. This programme was funded by Comisiún na Meán with the television licence fee.
What's music make you feel like?
Oh, it makes me happy. Very happy.
Anna Woods is the daughter of Alan Lomax, and she has happy memories as a young teenage girl of Margaret's visits to their home in Manhattan.
They became fast friends. And then Margaret came to New York many years later and stayed with Alan in his apartment there. But Alan, had a great affection for Margaret beyond, loving her singing and playing and her story. She was a unique personality. I remember her very well from that period. She had this white skin and dark hair and flashing black eyes. And she was very, she talked a lot about certain things. There were two subjects that she was kind of obsessed with. One was Guinness, and the other one was her teeth, because something had happened with her teeth, and she was determined to get new teeth, and that was one of her great goals. She was very voluble and very entertaining, but there was something about her that was kind of not present. I mean, it was like she was detached in some kind of way. Not in a bad way, really, but just she was off in another world.
Didn't you care whether you were beautiful or not?
No, I didn't mind very much.
Men must have told you that you were beautiful.
I never got anybody to tell me it.
When you were a young woman, you weren't told that you were beautiful?
No, never was.
You're a very handsome woman now,
Well, I just tell you, you see, I suppose maybe they did say it amongst themselves, but they never said it to me whether I was or not.
The first time I think that she came to stay with Alan in London, he told me this story. I was not there. So it must have been earlier in the 50s. And he had, there was a scarcity of good food at that time, even then, because it was still kind of post-war like. It was that way, and it was really hard to find any decent food. It was all pretty awful, not like it is today. So Alan somehow got hold of a steak, and he was really looking forward to eating it. And he was a pretty good cook himself, but like a short order cook, in a diner type of a cook. But Margaret got a hold of it. She said, Alan, let me do this. She said, I will cook this for you in a few, it's going to be delicious. So when she brought it to the table, it was boiled. She boiled the steak in water without any salt.
Oh, God.
Yes. And my father was like, oh, my God.
Anna continues her father and grandfather's legacy as a board member of the Archive of Cultural Equity, which houses their extensive collections. Reg Hall played a pivotal role as both participant and archivist of Irish traditional music in post-war London, serving as a pianist, ethnomusicologist and key figure in documenting the vibrant scene that emerged from massive Irish immigration of the 1940s onwards. Post-war immigration from the 1940s saw tens of thousands of Irish immigrants settle in London, helping to rebuild the city and bringing their rural Irish cultural traditions with them. This community started the first Irish traditional music pub sessions in London, a phenomenon which spread back to Ireland and then around the world. Reg Hall's most significant recording achievement was Paddy and the Smoke, which he co-produced with Bill Leader in 1968, recorded in the favoured Public House in Holloway, London. This groundbreaking album captured the authentic atmosphere of London's Irish pub sessions, where regional musical styles from all over Ireland met for the first time. Central to Hall's work was his role in documenting and promoting Maggie Barry, who became a towering figure in London's Irish music scene.
When did you first hear about Margaret Barry or meet her? Did you hear about her or meet her first?
I heard about her on As I Roved Out, which was on the radio BBC, Sunday mornings at 10:30. And it was a programme based on the BBC's current venture of making field recordings. And they had two collectors, Seamus Ennis and Peter Kennedy. And they used to go out and record on the tape recorder, come back and process some of the recordings on disc. And some of them would be put in the library, and many of them were lost forever. And Peter Kennedy went out to Northern Ireland and was recording in Northern Ireland, and he heard about Margaret Barry, and I now know that it was through Lomax. Peter found her in County Armagh in her caravan, photographed her, no electricity, had to drive into Dundalk, hired a hotel room and recorded her for the BBC. Now those BBC recordings exist now, but one of them or two of them were played that Sunday morning in 1952. I was bowled over. And I'd never heard a banjo played like that before. And her voice, I was just completely bowled over by it. And it was a one-off, it was never done again. So that was my impact, Margaret Barry, and I wrote it down. So I probably got the notes somewhere.
What was your first experience playing music in a pub in Camden Town?
Well, I went in, and the stage was made up, as far as I remember, of beer crates with lino on it, and a piano at the end, and there was enough room for 3 or 4 musicians, shoulder to shoulder, at sort of a foot off the ground, in a Victorian bar, all the glass and ornamentation, big mirror, a little bar at the end, and you'd go in at 9, pretty empty, go in and see Michael and Margaret and whoever. They always had another player with them. And the audience would be all men, all wearing blue serge suits, white tie, white shirts, big broad trousers at the bottom, standing there beautifully dressed, all with real cream hair, big fellas, and they were all labourers, bricklayers, working on the railway. And they were all polite and friendly, no hostility, and they just were chatting. Never clapped the instrumental music. They would clap every singer. Nobody called her Maggie. She was Margaret. They had great respect for her. Nobody sneered at her or took the piss out of her or anything like that. She was seen as the formidable person there. Gorman was highly respected. And give us a song, Margaret, give us a song, Margaret. And she would stand up slowly, and she always sort of leaned back a bit because the banjo was in front of her. So that she had this wonderful way of just getting up and bong, dong, dong, dong. She got the audience. And she always sang at every performance, "There's a bunny stone in Kerry." And the other one was, "If you ever go over to Ireland and take a tip from me." Then she would do one of the serious songs, and then she'd sit down perhaps, and then 10 minutes later she'd be up again. And when it was all over, she would hurl little comments at people to cover up her embarrassment. How do you finish a song when you're intense and you're in it, and suddenly everyone's clapping, good old Margaret, and she was essentially a shy person.
Paddy Joe Tighe from Ballyhonus, County Mayo, has been a dedicated friend and advocate of Maggie Barry from the time he first met her in 1958. His admiration for her grew to a deep friendship. He followed her concerts on frequent visits to the county and eventually accompanied her on his accordion. Paddy Joe also organised her concerts and managed bookings in the area for a long time. Now in his 80s, he has maintained that deep connection to this day, often making the long journey to her grave in Lawrencetown, County Down. He has become a very close friend of Eugene and Paddy Barry and their extended family, and often regales them with stories of her musical escapades in his native county of Mayo, where, he insists, she is still fondly remembered.
So the dance hall was built in 1950. It opened its doors in 1951, and it was in business for 18 years. And during the 18 years of its existence, it hosted the best loved bands and cabaret artists. And Margaret Barry was one of the artists in 1958. The next, I was reading the provincial newspaper, Western People, in 1981. So I drove to Ballycastle in North Mayo. Couldn't wait for the evening to come to see her and hear her for the first time performing live. I went there with a girlfriend of mine of that time, and I met Margaret for the first time. And as soon as I mentioned Todian, that I heard the time she was in Todian, straight away she said, "Oh, Father Horton." She said, yeah. So that year, as an excuse more than anything to be here as often as I could, I started doing their dates. And we made arrangements that she'd come for a visit to our house. And coincidentally, she arrived the week that man sitting here, Horton, died.
Right.
Coincidentally, after singing in his hall in Todian in 1958. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have a landline that time, we didn't, no such thing as a mobile phone. So Marlis, our neighbour, they had a landline. And when the people heard that she was in the locality, and some people remembering her, to seen her in Todian Hall, and she was so well thought of, and people were crazy about her, about her singing. And by Jove, for the 3 weeks, we were almost out every night in pubs. And I was accompanying her, and I used to accompany her on the accordion. And she was very good at playing polkas and jigs in particular. And we do, as the saying goes, for the want of a better word, we play a rake at them between the songs, you know what I mean? And she'd also say she'd like you to keep it mellow while she'd be singing, but then come down on the
There's a Blarney Stone in Kerry, there's a Blarney Stone in Clare, there's a Blarney Stone in Wicklow, and there's plenty in Kildare. There's a Blarney Stone in Sligo, and another in...
One night, she was doing a show, and there were large crowd of people there, and she was having her pint of Guinness, and Margaret would like to pretend she was drunk when she wasn't drunk at all. God, yes. You could smoke inside, of course, in them times, but there was two nuns sitting at the table, and they were wearing their headgear at that time, veils there. And the whole crowd of people sitting around. Margaret finished her song and went well down in the point. Why she we've two nuns here, they're Cork accent now. Can any of you tell why there's always two nuns together? The nuns just putting the veils like that. And the crowd was embarrassed to look at the nuns.
Waiting to hear what was going to go out.
Yes. She took another slug of the pint. Does any of yourself know? You know, Margaret. Does any of yourself know? Well, if you don't know, I'm going to tell you myself. One nun makes sure the other nun gets none. So then, that year, 1968, we had intended then to do a tour then together the next year. So of course we had a little farm at the time and cattle at the time, and my mother there on her own. My mother says, no, you're not going like that. Who's going to look after the hay? Who's going to look after cattle? But what I'd love to have done. So my mother put her foot down and said, no, it's not happening. And I regretted not doing that.
Taking the opportunity, yeah. Well, look, sure, life is as it is, You had all the things to be delighted about. Your friendship and...
That was Paddy Joe Ty again, who played accordion with Margaret Barry in the 1980s. Finbar Furey is one of Ireland's most celebrated traditional musicians and a master of the uilleann pipes. Taught by his father Ted, he became an exceptional piper by his teens, winning All-Ireland medals and achieving the rare distinction of taking the All-Ireland, the Oireachtas medal and all 4 provincial titles in the same year. In 1969, Finbar and his brother Eddie joined the Clancy Bros as backing musicians, bringing pipes, whistle, banjo and guitar to audiences worldwide. The Furey Bros were awarded Single of the Year for Her Father Didn't Like Me Anyway by BBC's John Peel in 1972. When younger brothers Paul and George joined them in 1976 to form the Furey Bros and Davy Arthur, they achieved international success with hits such as When You Were Sweet 16, The Green Fields of France and The Lonesome Boatman. Beyond music, Finbar co-designed the low D whistle with Bernard Overton, now played by musicians worldwide. He also appeared in films including Martin Scorsese's Gangs of New York and RTE's Love Hate.
She was great friends with my mother. Beautiful style of banjo and sang it. Margaret Barry. And she travelled the road with them. I met her in Killarney the last time I saw her. And she was great. She was great to us. She told us some good stories. One great story I heard about her, Brenda Bean challenged her to a drinking competition in the Brazen Head. And Brendan was carted and she was still drinking with the boys. She tried the ball under the table. So my mother used to say, "Ha! Took a woman to both banners on you." Anyway, she had her own little style of playing, and she became very famous. I mean, she was one of the first women to ever fill Carnegie Hall, You must remember that was a tough time, It's when we went over with the Clancy brothers to America that we found out what Maggie Barry did, what Margaret did, And she was so well known in America. Everybody knew who she was, All the folk musicians like Pete Seeger and all these guys, they don't know who Margaret was, My Leg in Love was her song. And she would let it out. And boy, chase it here in Cork, And the banjo would be rippling,
In May 2025, Eugene and Paddy Barry, along with Eugene's son Owen, an uilleann piper, sang songs and played tunes as part of a celebration of traveller culture at the Creative Spark Centre at Mahadin and Moore, Dundalk.
first three were born in the wagon in Dundalk. The rest of us were all soft travellers. We were born in the house. The three oldest were born in the wagon.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't easy for them.
No. And then they moved then till not far from where we're from, in Lawrencetown outside Banbridge. My father, he was working for like farmers at the time, and he asked them would there be anywhere to stay, and he said, look, see down beside the lake, there's a wee bit of the corner there. You stop in there, you'll have no problem. But they had 3 kids at that time, and my oldest sister, still living, like she's 73 now, Margaret, and she remembers going to the lake in the mornings with a bar soap. I would call it carbolical soap, but it's actually, you remember that, the red Lifebuoy soap, and with a wee towel, and she went down to wash her feet and her hands and stuff. So they were hardy people.
There was that time at one time, I can't remember, it was 1953 or 1958 or something, but she was with Alan Lomax, and she'd got this guy to bring her on a horse in the cart up to Buckingham Palace, and she handed in a letter from the Queen of the, she called herself the Queen of the Tinkers, into the Queen of England, and handed it in through the gate to some policeman, give that till your boss.
That would have been, I was born in 67, so 67, early 70s, Granny would have been back from America and stuff. Like, it was a big thing. She'd pulled up in this taxi, got out with a fur coat and all the stuff on her, like, into the house, and then there would have been sessions in the house, like Ronan Rafferty, the Sands, there's loads of different ones, and then she'd been there for a week and away again. But we do remember now, my father, you want to tell this one, Jane, about the getting the presents from New York? That was back in the 70s, like mid-70s, big thing.
We were only children, you know, and there used to be this big wooden crate would arrive. They'd come on a train, and then a taxi man from Portadown would have brought it to our house, and it was presents from America. Like, we were running about. I had a Planet of the Apes. I don't know if you remember that.
I had the clock, Batman clock.
He had a Batman clock.
This was stuff you wouldn't have got, like, you know.
And like, where we lived at home when we were young, we'd have got bullied because we were travellers, you know, but we were running about with the best of the toys that weren't in Ireland. They were from America, and nobody had them, but we had them.
She lived 3 doors up from us, but she used to come down during the day, but she had always the banjo with her. Every time she comes, she'd carry the banjo. Yeah, we didn't know really what we had, you know what I mean? When we were kids, we didn't really know what we had, like, but it's only later in life you realise, Jesus, like, this woman, look at the stuff she'd done, you know what I mean? She was in America one time, and she was heading out, they did gigs out west somewhere, but they stopped at this big filling station. But anyway, she was in this, it was like a reservation area, Indian reservation area. So she was in the shop buying a few bits and pieces, and she was coming around, these ladies came around and said, what tribe are you from? She had the dark hair, and she had a bandana on, like a class, like.
Because her grandmother, you see, her grandmother on her mother's side was full Spanish, and her name was Cleary, Cleory, you know, and that's where she was getting that. She had a very Romany look.
Yeah.
She had long black hair. She was very, very swarthy skin.
Swarthy, yeah. She was in New York one time, Tommy, and it was snowing. You know, it was about a metre of snow on the ground, but she was in this apartment block, Horn Gorman, up in the room, you know. But the heating was gone. But Granny had got friendly with, you know, where these buildings have janitors, they have somebody looking after this one particular building. So, for instance, a wee man, I think his name was Tommy or something, for instance, right? So he says, Tommy, where's the best place to go for heat? The heating's not going up in the apartment. Come with me, Maggie, way down into the dungeons and down to where he had all the heating, you know, the boiler and all that carry on. And the Gorman was looking for her for 2 or 3 hours, couldn't find her, and somebody said, I think she went with the janitor. And there she was, down in the boiler room, the heat going, the big coat, the Guinness going, the film was full, and she was going to play a gig somewhere, like, in New York, you know.
My daddy had a donkey called Ned, and he was now bred of a donkey, but my grandmother wanted it, and he wouldn't give it to her, so we got it off her. And she kept it up in the garden of her wee house, you know. She lived in it wasn't that big of a house, it was a good garden at the back, but she had this donkey. Nothing would do to get a couple of chickens in on a rooster. But the complaints was going in from all the people about this donkey going buck mad in the garden, you know. Bring him into the house, she says, and you tell the people that I've got rid of him. So I had to bring him in, and she kept the donkey in the house for a week. She spoke about Luke Kelly a lot, you know. Told me one time that she went and stayed with Luke. She was only supposed to go and stay for a weekend, but ended up staying for a month with him. I don't know whether she couldn't get away from him or he couldn't get away from her, one or the other, but she had great admiration for him. She loved him, you know, and talked about him all the time to me. Anyway, said he was a lovely young fella, you know. There's a lot of people who visit her grave and would be unknown to us, you know. I know a lot of years ago that I had a fella actually went to school with me, phoned me up one day, and he was a country artist, a fella called Paul Donnelly from Guildford, wee village down the road, and he said to me, Eugene, is it okay? He says, I have a friend with me. He says, could we go and visit your grandmother's grave? He goes, you can, surely. You've no call to ring me up and ask me, sure. A couple of weeks had went past and I happened to be up in the graveyard at my mum and dad's grave or whatever, and I just happened to go around to my grandmother's grave, and when I'm here, I went round, and there was a reed on it, lovely reed, read the wee note on the reed, and it was, and Christy Hennessy had left the reed.
Near Arranmore, in the county Galway, one pleasant evening in the month of May, I spied a damsel, she was young and handsome, oh, she nearly took my breath away.
Margaret Barry, Maggie's granddaughter, talks about her first impressions of her grandmother and recalls remarkable stories of her time with her up to the time of her death in Lawrencetown, County Down.
1960 or 61, around about then, and Granny got out of a big black car and she had a big brown fur coat on her, coming down with jewellery, earrings and the lot, big head of black hair and big red lipstick covered in makeup. And I couldn't get over it. To me, she looked like a film star. Now, I was only a 10-year-old child, but that's my earliest memory of her. Wasn't really interested and didn't really know, do you know what I mean? But I do remember her telling me about touring with Bob Dylan and Joan Baez. You know, and I'm going, I'm sure you did, Granny. I did. I said, Granny, sure, they were druggies. And she says, I said, did you take them, Granny? Of course I did. I went, oh, Granny. Of course I did. And then later on in that, I got the pamphlets and all, and she was with Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, and Granny, Michael Gorman, and Margaret Barry. She met Elvis Presley, and I know she met President Ford. I know all that, because she would have told us that now, you know. But see, my mommy would have been very popular. She would have sung... she would have went to Mead some Sundays, and I know when she would have got up, I always got my mummy up on the stage in O'Meath.
In Doyle's.
Doyle's in O'Meath. She was always asked to sing the song James Connolly. Yeah. Always asked to sing that song. Christy Hennessy told me that Granny taught him the Galway shawl in Camden Town.
Ah, but what she wore was a scarlet ribbon, and around her shoulders hung the Galway shawl.
We had the bed in the living room for her, you know, and my last memory was her sitting on the bed, and she would have leaned forward and sort of leaned on her knees and just would have had a smoke, you know. That would have been my last sort of recollection of her, you know.
Bob Dylan called her his favourite folk singer. Christy Moore says she still inspires him. And Varn Morrison talks about a great soul singer when her name is mentioned. At a time when Irish traditional music might have been heading for extinction, exiled musicians kept the flame burning, resulting in a vibrant Irish scene in London. The uncompromising voice and raucous banjo playing of Maggie Barry were at its formidable heart. Mary Margaret Cleary was born on the 23rd of January 1917 in Cork. She left home around 1933, aged just 16, initially leaving on a bicycle and eventually living in a traditional horse-drawn caravan. She travelled throughout Ireland, favouring the border counties on the eastern seaboard. She adopted the persona of an Irish traveller and changed her name to Maggie Barry, taking the surname of her son-in-law. Teaming up with the great Sligo fiddle player Michael Gorman, she became a star on the burgeoning Irish folk scene and went on to headline concerts at the Royal Albert Hall in London and New York's Carnegie Hall. She was a major driving force of the folk revival, emerging from post-war II Britain, spreading back home to Ireland and eventually engulfing the world. She was discovered in Dundalk in 1952 by Alan Lomax, the renowned American folklorist, collector and archivist, and she is buried a few miles away in Lawrencetown, County Down. This is very much a border county story with tentacles spreading around the world.
In part 2 of the remarkable story of Margaret Barry, we heard recordings of conversations between Margaret Barry and Alan Lomax with the permission of Anna Wood, daughter of Alan Lomax, courtesy of cultureequity.org archives. We heard Anna Wood recalling her memories of Margaret Barry in New York. Alan Woods, liaison and field recording officer with the Irish Traditional Music Archive. Reg Hall, ethnomusicologist and researcher. Paddy Joe Tighe from County Mayo, a friend of Margaret Barry. Finbar Furey, singer, songwriter and actor. We heard recordings of Maggie's boys, the grandsons of Margaret Barry, Paddy and Eugene, and Maggie's great-grandson Owen, who was playing the uilleann pipes at an event recorded in the Creative Spark at Dundalk in 2025. We also heard memories by Margaret Barry, Margaret's granddaughter. The Oriel Traditional Music Archives, Newry, provided advice and support. The remarkable story of Margaret Barry was researched, recorded and produced by Tommy Fagan and edited by Alan Byrne.
This programme was funded by Comisiún na Meán with the television licence fee.